All right. Good morning, Teach Better family. It is, what is it, Tuesday, November 2nd. This is your daily drop-in. I am Jeff, and I've got a very special guest here. Mickey Hernandez is going to hang out with me for a little while this morning. If you're watching or listening live, drop in the comments. Let us know where you're at. Love to know what you're drinking. I've got some coffee. I'm representing the Guiding Principles podcast, so shout out to Rob Breyer on that. We're going to talk a little bit about, we've got some holidays to celebrate today, including one that's very, very near and dear to my heart. So we'll get into that. And a good news story that I just really enjoyed looking at this morning, and hopefully bring some joy to your day. And we're going to dive into the work that Mickey does and the messages that she's sharing. Her new book that just came out. When did it come out?
Came out a couple of weeks ago.
So like fresh. That's gonna be, so we're gonna get into that because I love the message of the book, and I really want to get into the message, but also the backstory and where it comes from. I'm really excited about that. So drop in the comments, let us know what's going on. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. And if you're listening later, you might be on the Teach Better Talk podcast, which we appreciate. Drop us a subscribe, maybe a rating and review. We'd appreciate that as well. We're gonna be back in about 27 seconds. All right. Good morning. Welcome to Daily Drop-In, where we're live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. And we are on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, and of course on the Teach Better Talk podcast. Mickey, I see that you're drinking something. I hope it's not coffee, because you're supposed to be going back to bed after this, because it is super early where you're at right now.
It is super early. I'm in Los Angeles. It's about 4 a.m., but happy to be here. But I'm drinking some tea. So nice warm tea.
All right, I got some coffee here, so I'm going that. And I referenced the podcast, which is one of the podcasts on our podcast network, and Rob is just a great guy down there. He'll have a great podcast. So excited to have you here this morning. I can't believe that. I honestly, if you had emailed me and been like, nah, I'm out, I would have been perfectly okay with it and understood it. It's super early. We do have some West Coast folks that jump on with us in the morning stuff from time to time. So if you're West Coast, Mickey's got you represented. You can go back to bed for an hour. So it's good there. But we got a few jumping in. Bree's here this morning. Bree, good morning. Sandra, good to see you. Happy Tuesday to you as well. We got Canada in the house right now with Sandra and Brad. So love seeing you both here. I'm excited to dive in, like I said, Mickey, to talk about your message and your book. I also was snooping on your Instagram and watching some of your acting reel, and you do voices and you do commercials, and you've been on TV shows and movies and stuff. So I'm going to get into that too. I'm going to ask you some of that stuff too. But before we get going too far into one thing specifically, you're a new face to our community, which we love. It's one of our favorite things to do on Daily Drop-In, is to bring new people with great messages and good vibes into our family here. So I'd love to take a minute if you could just kind of share who you are, what you do, why you said yes to this craziness at 4 a.m., and just kind of introduce yourself to the audience, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So my name is Mickey Hernandez. I live in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Central California, so a small town called Kingsburg. It's outside of Fresno, and it's kind of the opposite of where I am now. It's very, small, rural community. I had the opportunity to grow up with the same people like all my life. So it was a really kind of neat experience to grow up in that. And then I moved to LA, which is obviously a very big city, and went to UCLA and first studied dance for a while and kind of like world arts cultures. And after that, kind of jumped into entertainment, did a little bit of the background, kind of like business side of things, was in an office and was very uncomfortable in an office. I was just like, okay, like I'm making money, I have benefits, but like I don't know if I belong here, and started taking acting classes, which I really kind of fell in love with and got into that. And then went into acting kind of full time a few years ago. And then kind of, I think I'm just a creative person at heart, wrote a children's book and had a manuscript sitting around for a while. And then during COVID, I actually decided to go forward and self-publishing the book, which is now out. And yeah, so I do a lot of different things. Always keep myself busy, which is another reason why I'm here. I'm like, oh yeah, 4 a.m. I can do that. Like,
Yeah, why
I don't
not,
know.
right?
Yeah, I don't have a routine. Like
I'm
this
sure
can
you've had
be
to be
my
on sets earlier than 4 a.m. So
definitely. I've done like night shoots and yeah, sleep I love, but I can always go back to
I love
bed.
it. So this is probably not the question that most people ask you, but in my mind, I get interested. When you were doing the behind the scenes stuff, what were you doing? What were some of the things that you didn't enjoy? Were you in like a cubicle, but like were you doing like agent type work or contract type work? Or what was your because it was in the
So
entertainment industry still or
it was.
okay.
So I worked at Paramount Pictures for about
Oh,
4
okay.
years, and I worked in their theme parks division of all places. So you might be like, "Oh, Paramount doesn't have theme parks," but they try a lot, and it was actually like a really fascinating part of the business. It was technically licensing. So we would meet with people from around the world who were interested in building a theme park,
Okay.
and a lot of my bosses kind of had like an Imagineering, like Disney background, and we would come up with different concepts for rides or like theme parks. And
Based on
um,
Paramount pictures and projects and stuff.
yeah,
Assuming okay.
absolutely. So it was fun. I like got to learn a lot about licensing and kind of like the
Yeah.
business side of things, but also got to be creative and coming up with like if there was a cafe or like different type of worlds, and then also like hotels and things like that. So it was fun. Yeah.
I'd imagine that has whether knowingly or subconsciously served you well as you've got into acting and going into gigs and contracts and agreements with different
Hmm.
people, understanding some of that. Is that played into that a lot? Just understanding the language and the for lack of a better term, the games and politics that might go on when it comes to contracts and such?
100%. I
Yeah.
feel that if I jumped into acting as an 18-year-old, I think I would have been completely in a different mindset,
Sure.
probably focused on the wrong things. But I think, having those years as like an early adult really kind of helped me get in the game of like, all right, this is a business first and foremost. There
Yeah.
are a lot of moving parts, and really gave me, I think, the long-term mindset that I think it takes to be successful in Hollywood, where I'm like, all right, I understand I'm in this in the long haul. There are a lot of different people and everyone's just trying to, validate their own position and their own job. And so it helped me get a little bit of a tough skin and not take things personally.
That's good. Yeah, I'm such a firm believer in the benefits that past experiences bring to us, even if we don't always recognize, the things that we learn and we take away even from the experiences that we don't look back as impactful or educational. And then
Hmm.
something happens, you're like, oh, that was from that thing that I forgot I even did in my life. Like that just clicked and that was interesting. So that's really cool. Um, I promise we're gonna get to the book, but I'm stuck on your acting and stuff right now. Curious what has been like the coolest or I don't know if this might be the same one, the coolest and or the part that made you the proudest to play or to book or land. And like what are your target? Like what are you trying to do? Like what are your roles that you try to play? Are you just open fair game for anything? Do you prefer to do action? And I know you do some action because I want to talk about one of those that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Action or comedy, drama, like where's your go-to if you had your choice all the time?
If I had my choice all the time, I would love to play the kind of like in a sci-fi world or like near future. So
Okay.
maybe like 50 years in the future and play some type of vigilante hacker who exposes the system. Like I
Ooh.
love being kind of the underdog who, is like whip smart, a little conniving, can play both sides type of thing. And then yeah, if there's like a few fight scenes thrown in the mix, that would be awesome. So yeah, my kind of wheelhouse is like darker dramas, but at the
Hmm.
same time, I also love comedies, and I've done like a few different projects in that space, and like improv is really fun. I think really I love just kind of like the writing side of things in terms of like if it's excellent writing, no matter what genre, that I just like love diving into like
Yeah.
complex characters. And I think my favorite role that I played, it was a few years ago. It was a fantastic director who was out of USC MFA program, Shinrika Evans. And she wrote a story kind of based on a friendship that she had. And it was a friend of hers who had body dysmorphia, and they thought that they were trans. And it was kind of like a pre-transition type of story. And that was really such an eye-opening experience, just getting to talk with her and kind of her relationship with this friend who actually ended up passing away. And not knowing a lot about the trans community, it was really a lovely opportunity for me to really like learn and like be more empathetic towards that community,
Yeah.
and play this character in a way that, I couldn't draw on my own personal experience, but just from like anecdotal experiences, meeting up with different people, and really teaching me kind of like a glimpse of what they go through. So that was really incredible.
Can you share the title of that so if anybody wants to go check it out?
Yes, it's called Casey, and I believe it's on Vimeo or YouTube. It's a
Okay.
short, and it's beautifully done. It is quite intense. But I think it was, such a beautiful story.
That's awesome. So there's one that I watched. I can't remember you had it in your Instagram reels of your acting stuff. I can't remember the title of it now, but a bunch of guys with blaster guns trying to get you, and you are all over the place, sliding on the ground, ninja kicks. You bash a guy's head into the wall. What was that one called?
That's called Hexit.
Hexit. So
Uh-huh.
I was just flipping through. I was watching a bunch of your scenes, like
Mhm.
you had a role in corner and playing there, and I was watching a few, and then I got to that one. I'm like, oh, okay, they got blaster guns. What's going on? And then you slam the guy's head in the wall. I'm like, I'm in. So, but my question for that was more about. So it looked like you've had quite a bit of, or at least some, training in combat and stage combat and stuff. Is that
Mhm.
something you've gotten into?
Absolutely. So I think coming from my dance background, I
That's why
love.
when you said that earlier, I was like, oh, okay. So she already had a
Uh-huh.
lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the flexibility aspect and
Mm-hmm.
choreography. And the great thing about fight combat, and I do like kickboxing and boxing just like
Okay.
for fun. But the great thing about, combat fighting is that it all is choreographed when it's done well, and you get to be dramatic. And
So it's like a
I
dance.
mean, I
Is
would
that
never smash a guy's head into a wall, and so, but it's fun to pretend. He's a bad guy. He's a bad guy.
sure?
So yeah, I have had quite a bit of, taking classes and workshops and
Yeah.
working with stunt coordinators. So it's a blast for sure.
Very cool. I would love to pretend smash a guy's head in the wall.
It's so
Um,
fun.
it'd
Give it
be
a
a good
shot
time.
sometime.
So, all right. So let's talk about the book.
Hmm.
So the book is Cake Mix, and I'm gonna let you break it down. So it just came out, so that's super exciting. So congratulations on that. Self-published, that's awesome. I love seeing that. Tell us about tell us the premise of the book and whatever you want to share about the book, and then we'll dive into sort of how you got there.
Absolutely. So it is a children's picture book. I have a copy right here. It's called Cake Mix, Learning to Love All Your Ingredients. And it is a really kind of like beautiful story that's inspired by my kind of upbringing and background. It's about a first grader named Remy. She's mixed race, and she goes to a new school, and she's really excited to play with everyone and looks around at all the different groups. And then a flood of kids come to her and ask her all these questions like, where are you from? Why are your eyes light but your skin is dark, your hair is kind of curly, like what are you? And that big question of what are you kind of sends her off on this like confusing path of, okay, I'm a kid, like I don't know how to answer this. And then she goes home to her mom and kind of explains it, and her mom immediately starts baking a cake with her, and she's like, what, mom, like what's going on? And then through the process of baking a cake, her mom starts to ask her questions of like, would you enjoy this if it was just made of like one thing? And she learns along the way that she happens to have a lot of ingredients that make up who she is. And then it kind of ties into like what is ethnicity and defining
Hmm.
it in a very like kid friendly way. And then she learns that she doesn't, have to like claim to be one ingredient or the other. Like she gets to be a bunch and a mix of them. And she learns that that's something to be proud of. So it's a very fun, like really colorful illustrations. My illustrator, Victoria Lewis, did a beautiful job. So it's like fun and whimsical, but also I think it's a great tool for parents and educators to kind of tackle, ethnicity in a very kid friendly way. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is why I love Daily Dropping, because this is what I got connected to you because I was coming live with you this morning, and the book's on the way to my house now.
Oh,
The
amazing.
front image, I'm like, oh, that is totally my daughter looking at cake batter. But
Hmm.
I love getting her books that are open her eyes to things and to think through the kids that she sees that might look different than her, that might
Hmm.
practice different religions, might think differently, everything like that. And she has been just really loving diving into that. So I'm excited for us to read that book.
What's her name?
She's 7. Her name is Jacqueline.
Oh, awesome.
So that's gonna be fun. And she loves to bake with her mom, so
Mm,
it's gonna be a really cool connection there. So
amazing.
so tell me about the journey to that book. You said you had the manuscript for a while. It sounds like it's been sort of in the works or in your mind at least for a while. You said it pulls from
Hmm.
your experience, so you can go back as far as you want, however detailed you want. But I'd love to hear sort of the journey of how you came to write the book and decided this was something you were going to do, and then if we can go even further into the deciding to self-publish versus going out to publishers and stuff like that too. I'd love to hear just sort of that whole thing.
Absolutely. So I wrote the manuscript, I want to say about 2.5 years ago, and it came from I was volunteering in a kindergarten classroom for a few years in a row in Hollywood. And, it's part of LA School District. So I was going to all the public libraries, kind of all over the city. And it was really fun to just pick out picture books every week to read to the kids. And I would, read it out loud and we would talk about it and it was such a fun thing for me to kind of like interact. I've always just like loved kids and spending time with them. And but the crazy thing to me is that LA public library system, I want to say is second largest outside of New York. And it was really apparent to me that there were not that many books that I could find. And this was, 5 years ago, that featured kids that looked like the classroom I was speaking to. It was like primarily like Latino and Asian American students.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it kind of like sent me back to my childhood and thinking about what were the books I read and what were things I was exposed to. And I was fascinated that there were, stories related to holidays or maybe like one kind of cultural moment. But you didn't really get to see a lot of like Black, brown, and Asian kids just kind of like living their life and doing kid stuff. And so I kind of, after reading like hundreds of books, got really into kind of like the storytelling aspect and like the formula of how these books were told. And I've always kind of had an interest, as an actor, I'm a storyteller. So writing to me has seemed a little bit intimidating, but a children's book seemed approachable. So I started to come up with different ideas, and everyone says, write what you know. And I thought that this might be like a great way to introduce myself as a writer if it, is tied in to kind of my background. And so I went through writing the manuscript. I had a few different friends read it. And then I started doing research about, how to get this out there, pitched it out to traditional publishers, traditional lit agents. And, as like a brand new writer, eh, no one was really kind of like taking an interest. I had a couple mentors who were passing it along, but I would get people that were like, oh, we have, a story that's like pretty similar.
Mm.
And, that was frustrating to hear. But as an actor, I'm like used to rejection. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I read a lot of books that were very similar in theme. So I was like, okay, like, sure.
Why can we print
Um,
all these books that are this very similar but not mine, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I kind of like set it to the side thinking maybe this is not the time for it. And COVID hit. I was inside like all of us were and not able to do, on camera acting. I was able to do some voiceover work, but it really was after everything with, the killing of George Floyd and the protests and Breonna Taylor and all of that kind of I mean, if I'm sure everyone has their own version of that time, but for me, it was really, kind of a reminder that I, as like a woman of color in America, I can't necessarily like wait for other people to give me opportunities. Like that's just, something that might not just like naturally happen. And so I was really inspired by the idea of ownership. And with this story in particular, I think it was one of those that if I did take it to a publisher, it would be out of my hands. It would
Hmm.
be in the hands of 20 other people. They would have assigned an illustrator. The story may have changed. Things could have, gone a different way. And so I thought, this is a great opportunity to seek out funding on my own. So I applied to, several different grants and was very fortunate enough to be chosen by a group called I Fund Women in partnership with American Express. And they offered me a $25,000 grant, which
Wow.
was incredible. They were, really championing like Black women entrepreneurs. And from there, I kind of pitch. I have a blog as well called Mixed Kids and Company. And so I kind of pitched the blog as this like multimedia platform celebrating diversity from kind of like the lens of mixed perspectives or people who are immigrants, first generation, anyone who has like a multicultural kind of
Hmm.
background. And so pitch that, got this money and was like, oh, wow, okay, like let's do something with this. And so part of the money I was able to really devote to the book. And I had an illustrator that I was interested in. I found her on Instagram and, like a young, I don't know, she's like 19 years old. And I like DM'd her. She didn't respond. I emailed her like twice, didn't respond for like 4 months. And then finally she was like, oh, hey, like just seeing this, like I'm down. I was like, okay, great, let's go. And so from there, it was really such a beautiful learning process. I had a lot of support by being in like a meetup group headed by a man named Jesse Bird, and he's an author and publisher himself, and kind of like this community through the internet of like people that were meeting up during the pandemic to discuss
Hmm.
their book and having critique circles and just really getting in tune with like a lot of resources that are available. So hiring an editor, a proofreader, formatters, and kind of going along this long, long process. But it was really incredible because I think it taught me a lot about, how to take a story from a Word document into now this beautiful thing I can hold in my hands. And so I'm very fortunate and grateful to have that self-publishing experience because I don't know if I'll do it again, to be quite honest. It's a lot of
It's a
work. And
lot of
now I'm
work.
like, in the marketing and like press kind of phase. And then getting it into like schools and libraries, which is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But it really has given me like a ton of insight into how the process works. And so it's something I want to continue doing. I want to write stories of kids doing kid things, and I want them to look all shades and have all different types of backgrounds. And this is kind of like a great way to intro of like really diving into the publishing
Yeah.
world and having respect for actually every part of the process. So
Wow.
yeah, it's
That's
been really fun.
That's awesome. And what a powerful story of advocating for yourself and just going for it. Going after the grant and getting the grant,
Mhm.
and just going through that process. That's really, really cool. Um, how long was that process? Because so I got a book back here that I did with a couple of people a few years
Mhm.
ago, and I remember that process. Different book. Ours was like an educational instruction
Mhm.
book. Um, but ours also doesn't have any illustrations or anything either, right?
Mhm.
So, how long was the process from? Well, actually, no, I was gonna stop, but no, like, how long did you spend writing the story? But then, what was the process like? Once you're like, okay, I'm gonna self-publish that. What was that process? Because there are a lot of people that watch and listen in our communities who have aspirations to write books, whether an adult book or children's book. I think
Mhm.
one of the most common misconceptions or things they don't think about is how long this process really can be, even regardless of what the book is. So, how long was that process from how long did it take you to write the manuscript? And then how long
Mhm.
from I'm going to self publish to, hey, the book's in my hands?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back of how long it took me to write the manuscript. I want to say I did it probably over the course of maybe a couple of months.
Okay.
Children's books typically have to be under 1,000 words. Like the sweet
Okay.
spot is like 500 to 800 words. And I think I started out with about 1,500 words. I love words. I'm like
Gotcha.
very, and I kind of knew it from the aspect of the type of stories I was reading, but I didn't really understand that with picture books specifically, the illustrations are able to speak on their own, or that's what makes like a really great book. And
Yeah.
so the words, aren't necessarily secondary, but they offer something different that maybe the pictures can't offer. So I would say like the actual writing of it was probably I probably wrote it in like maybe a couple of days or 3 or to 4 days over the course of 2 months, kind of like going back and revisiting it. But then the editing and like proofreading and cutting it down process, that did take a few months of working with an editor, sending it to my critique circle, and
Hmm.
really finding spots that I might not have been aware of. Like initially, there was kind of one antagonist, and I was kind of brought to light in this critique group that might not be as received as like inclusive for the story purposes. And so I kind of made it like a group antagonist of like a group of kids asking questions versus one kid.
Hmm.
And so that kind of like sent me back to, okay, like how can I rework by like, taking out this main antagonist. So there was a lot, several months of kind of that editing and like getting it down to what the story is today. And then when it came to, the actual self-publishing process, I had read that if you take it to a traditional publisher, it can take a year to 2 years before it hits the shelf. And I
Hmm.
thought like, oh my goodness, that's like ridiculous. That's so long. I want to get this out there. This
So
is
how long did it take
important.
you?
It took me from hiring an illustrator to having it available online. It, I want to say July, I can't do math. August, September, October. So it took me 14 months, about, yeah, 15 months. And I was very naive. I hired my illustrator in July of 2020. We had kind of like an agreement in place. And I was like, okay, if you can get this done in 4 to 5 months, awesome. And I wanted it to be out around my birthday, which is in March. So it's turning 30. So it's like, ooh, big 30th birthday present for
Sure, yeah.
myself. And sure enough, it's came out in October. And so the illustrations, she worked very well. And I had a lot of notes. So that's kind of where like a lot of the
Sure.
delays, and like I wanted to give her plenty of space to kind of do her thing. Like I gave an outline of, these are the characters and the type of qualities I like, and some reference photos for like what they're wearing, and I really wanted to give her like a lot of freedom. And then from there, kind of taking it based on the critiques I was getting, then we did have to make changes of kind of the layout of things. And so there was a lot of kind of back and forth in the later stages of finessing the details. And so the illustrations were finally done, I want to say, and like formatting was also like a big process too. And, I'm not like a designer, like a graphic designer. And
Hmm.
so I think that was like a little something I like had to kind of be really patient about, is I didn't understand like how intricate everything is and like the layout part. So I think we got the layout of the book finalized around May.
Okay.
And then from there, kind of like all of the logistics of, okay, how are we going to get this printed? How are we going to get this like available? And throughout the illustration phase, I was doing the research. But if you're interested in, writing a book, anyone listening, definitely, I just, be aware there are a lot of like smaller costs that you might not think about. Like you have to purchase like a copyright and like ISBN numbers, and learning, if you want to print on your own versus going through like a distributor. So I'm doing print on demand with Ingram Spark,
Okay.
mostly because they allow kind of like the ability to go to any library, any school district, any bookstore, and I can send them the ISBN number, and then they can order however many copies and then get it directly printed. So it kind of takes out a lot of the printing on my end. But I do have like a small kind of batch on my own that I printed that I can like hand out to, like friends and family or like bloggers or influencers and people like that. But yeah, that process of like searching what kind of printing you want to do, and then how are you going to market it, and all of that, takes a long time, and then getting
Mhm.
it fully available. It didn't have like the finished ready like book that I could like send to a printer until I want to say like July of this year. It's like a full year.
For you.
Um, and then getting proofs back from the printer took some time as well. Ingram's very big, but they aren't maybe the quickest option. So yeah, I didn't have the final proofs until beginning of October. Yeah, and then I
Wow.
wanted those in my hand and to see them before I was like, "It's available." I
Yeah.
didn't want people to get, like, a backwards printed book or something, so
That was a very
so yeah.
impressive breakdown of that timeline. But I think it's really important because a lot of people don't realize that, like, after you write the book, like, a lot of the work starts.
Mhm.
But, like, you got that, you get that part done, and you're like, "Oh, I knocked that out. I've been dedicating myself to writing and creating stuff," and you're like, "Oh, there's a whole lot of work to do now after I wrote the book." And so
Absolutely.
yes.
That's why a publishing house has, multiple
Yeah,
departments
a whole
that,
bunch of
like,
people.
do all
So
these
so if you
things.
think about it, if it's gonna take a year to 2 years for the publishing house to do that has dozens, if not more than like dozens and dozens of people on staff, and you were able to do it in what, a year, 14 months? Not bad. Not
Mhm.
bad speed. Tell you.
Not bad speed.
Not
Yeah.
bad.
I
I
had
know Bree was here earlier. She's probably in her class now, but Bree's a children's author twice, 3 times over now. And I know she's gonna watch this and fall in love with you and wanna and eat that book up like crazy. So,
oh,
you're
nice.
gonna get a
Hi,
fan
Bree.
for sure. And Bree, I saw that she was in it earlier. So, um, that's awesome. I congrats on the book. I think it's an awesome message. I'm really excited to get it in my hands and my daughter's hands and listen to it. I think if you've been watching with us or listening later, this is a book that I think can bring a really great message into your classrooms, into your school districts. And it sounds like Mickey goes in and reads books. So you can probably, I'm just volunteering her to like zoom into your classroom or Skype in and read it, I bet. Is that okay? There you
Absolutely,
go. So I
yes.
love it.
You have a professional voice actor who's gonna read a children's
Okay, so
book.
you brought that up again. Curious, when you do the book reading, do you do like when you do? There's obviously a lot of voice acting routes you can
Mhm.
go. Do you do voices, or is it more like commercial voice acting, or is it character?
My 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 lane is pretty much commercials, narration. I do
Okay,
a little bit of, like, VR games, so I have
okay,
done, like, some character work, but specifically for Cake Mix, it's pretty, like, the illustrations are very fantastical, but the characters themselves are really grounded. So I
gotcha.
kind of just do like my regular
Just you,
voice.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I should probably work on my how to sound like a 6-year-old. There are tools to do it. I'm just not there
Yeah, there's some
yet.
folks that it's always fun to me when you like the kids shows and then you find out that the voice actors are
Oh,
45, 50 years old, and you're like,
totally.
wow, you do an
Yeah.
amazing job sounding like a little kid,
It's an
singing like a little kid.
impressive,
I mean, it's incredible.
uh-huh,
Mm,
impressive skill that I don't have yet.
yeah, well, you're still light years ahead of me, so that's all right. All right, I want to transition. See, we're going to dive into some good news and some holidays and celebrate some of that right now. So we'll be back in a second here. All right, well, welcome back to Daily Drop. We're live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. And for some reason, I had to look up and remember that because I was forgetting where we were. I'm here. I've got Nikki Hernandez. We've been all over the place talking about all kinds of cool stuff, including your book. But now we're going to talk about, we always love to share some of the holidays that are going on because it's always an opportunity to bring that up with colleagues or in your classroom. And there's a lot of times some unique ones. And then we always love to share a good news story as a way of hopefully putting a smile on your face, but also a great conversation starter stuff. So I'm excited about that. So a few holidays today. Today is All Souls Day. So if you celebrate that, we're thinking about you there. It's the Melbourne Cup Day, which is called Cup Day in Australia. Apparently, it's like the largest horse race day in Australia. Didn't know. It's also election day all over the place. So my kids are off school today because their school is used as an election site. But it's also National Deviled Egg Day. Are you a deviled eggs fan? Like a deviled egg fan? Do you?
Oh my goodness, I love deviled eggs.
My grandma has always made so I hate mayonnaise. Like I hate it. Like I can't eat it
Mhm.
with anything. But for some reason, always loved deviled eggs. And my grandma has always made the best. She does the paprika on top, so they've got the red
Mhm.
glow. And so my mom knows how to do it now, so she continues to make it. And like so, anytime we do, where grandma brings stuff, there's always deviled eggs for Jeff. So
Oh my
I
goodness.
didn't
Yeah.
know, but apparently today's the day. So
Wow.
um really, really important. This is the holiday that is near and dear to my heart. Today is actually the 55th birthday of David Schwimmer, Ross from Friends.
All right.
Very important day. It's
Mhm.
also Nellie's birthday. I don't know if anybody's as old as me and remembers Nellie and country grammar. Today would be a day to blast some of that because he's 40. Nellie is 47, which is crazy for me to think
Really?
about. Yes.
Are we thinking of
Um,
the same Nelly? Former
yes.
rapper, now country star?
Oh,
Okay.
yes. Only I know him as a rapper because I'm a decent enough bit older than you. But yes, Nelly,
With the Band-Aid?
with the Band-Aid and the Florida Georgia
Okay.
line, yes. When I was in, gosh, it was when I was I was in high school, close to the end of my high school tenure. It was when Country Grammar came out, and it was just that's
Mm,
all anyone, just everywhere.
wow.
So kind of seeing him, and then he kind of went away for a while, and then he popped back with what was it with Florida Georgia Line and Cruise, and now
Mhm.
so anyway, he's 47, which is nuts, and the fact that David
Wow.
Schwimmer is 55 is crazy too because anyway. So happy birthday to Ross and Nelly there. So good news story today I got from goodnewsnetwork.org, which is one of the places that we go. It's a great site. They have multiple stories every single day of just finding good news around the world. This one comes from Cape Verde, which is in West Africa, and this is they're reporting a huge increase in the number of loggerhead sea turtle nest, and this has been due to there's been a huge conservation effort over the last was it 10 or 5 years or so, with a 2,000% increase in loggerhead turtle nest. And this has been like they're talking like boots on the ground, people monitoring when it's nighttime. They're out with like under the stars, like watching. They've put some huge restrictions on poaching and stuff like that, and it's just I think it really cool to see the number of. So they've risen from 10,725 to nearly 200,000 over the last 5 years,
Wow.
which is incredible. So this is a great story. One, I just love sea turtles, so it's
I
great to
love
know that
turtles.
watching
Yeah.
them. And it's great that the conservation is working and they're seeing the results because they recognize the impact that turtles have on the environment and in the
Mhm.
world there. So I think and on the ecosystem there, which I have no idea what that impact is. I probably should have read more. But I think this could be a great story to share with your kids because one, it's turtles, so you get to look at picture turtles. You can dive
Turtle.
into what conservation is and why that's important, how different animals have such different roles in the ecosystem, how it all works together. You can talk about turtles in general and the different types and everything like that. I think there's a lot you can take from there. And again, it's turtles. So like it's dude from Finding Nemo, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's where my mind goes.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
that's awesome. So keep it up out there in West Africa. That's awesome that they're putting that effort in. Hopefully, we have sea turtles forever. So lots of cool holidays today. Sea turtle doing better in West Africa. That's awesome. Nick, it's been awesome having you on this. I'm super excited about the book and the work you're doing. Can we talk a little bit about your website and some of the you mentioned the blog, you mentioned it was kind of tied
Mhm.
a little bit into the grant you got. And can you tell us about, tell us where to go and find it, but also sort of what you're trying to do with the message and the things that you're putting out on that website?
Absolutely. So it's called Mixed Kids and Company, and it's at www.mixedkidsco.com. And I started it a couple of years ago and branched out and did like a podcast for a season, and then kind of am coming back into like more of a writing thing. But essentially, I love to interview creatives and entrepreneurs who have a multicultural background. And essentially, I just want to like talk to people I admire and I think are really cool. It's like a good excuse to be like, hey, you want to hang out and
Podcast
chat?
is really good for that.
Yeah.
As is Daily Dropping, by the way.
Totally.
Example.
And yeah, and I think mostly I think I'm passionate about kind of like opening up people's perspectives by listening to someone from like a totally different kind of world than their own. And I think specifically people who are, either mixed or like an immigrant first generation, I think they have like a very unique perspective because oftentimes they're kind of like living in two different worlds
Yeah.
or taking up multiple different spaces. And I think that comes with the ability to like have a lot of empathy and kind of able to look at things from multiple sides. And I think something that has been a little bit challenging for me over the last few years, specifically when it comes to like navigating Hollywood, is I think that, like identity politics is such like a huge concept and such like a huge word. But I think oftentimes people kind of tend to think of like identity and inclusion and diversity as like siloed groups. And I think there's one thing to be like, culturally proud in your heritage. And if that involves kind of like one group, and that's awesome, that's fantastic. But I do kind of like fear a little bit that some of that rhetoric can lead a little bit to like an us versus them kind of mentality, where I'm really passionate about like I don't know, we can all learn from one another, and like, everyone kind of has like their own unique individual story. And at least for me, like it's, I'm like Mexican and Native American and Black and Polish Jewish and like all of these things, but I'm also like grew up in a rural environment in California. Now I live in a big city. So like I'm just like a huge proponent of like intersectionality, and like there are multiple
Yeah.
things that make up our perspective, not just one like identity factor. And so I think that's what the blog is like meant to do, is like always coming from like a positive place as well, and talking to people who are like, an artist kind of like doing something new in their space, or an entrepreneur who is like, creating amazing food for their community. So yeah, just like really looking at kind of smaller kind of, I don't know. I think as a society, we like love celebrities and celebrities are awesome, but I'm also interested in like people who aren't famous who are doing like amazing things. And so that's kind of like been a really exciting thing for me, is to like learn from other people and kind of their perspective, and opens up my view of the world as well.
Well, that's awesome. And you might not be famous yet, but you're doing amazing things. So keep it up. I appreciate you. Appreciate you jumping on here. Best place to get to the book, is it Amazon, or do you have somewhere else you prefer?
Yeah,
or on the
it's
site, or
kind of like I wanted to give people options. So if you go to mixedkidsco.com/shop, you can find 3 different links there. It's on Amazon, Bookshop, and Barnes and Noble right now. And an ebook version will be available soon. I definitely highly recommend getting the physical copy because the illustrations are really fun for kids to look at up close. And yeah, like I would definitely recommend as a holiday gift. It's really great. Anyone who, it's for like 5 to 8 year olds, but I have a ton of friends who are buying it for like their babies, which I think is adorable. Starting their collection young. And yeah, so it's out there.
That's awesome. And you got your handle up front here. Are you most active on Twitter or Instagram? Where do we go?
Instagram. Yeah, that's my kind of like company Instagram. And then my personal is at Momikki, Momikki. My real name is Monique, so it's like kind of a blend of the two names. And yeah, I post a lot on there, like acting stuff too, and yeah, a lot of other things.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for getting up super early with us and sharing your story and your message. I'll say it again that I think it's a really important message. And I'm excited to dive into the book. I hope it's good, because otherwise I'm going to be really disappointed.
I mean, I gotta say, It might not be for everyone, but I actually do think it is for everyone.
I think it is, and it should be for everyone. I think it's really important for that. All jokes aside, that it's important to read books that you touched on all the books that you read in the LA County schools, and the representation just wasn't there, or it was very specific, right? Versus bringing in that representation is such a key important, not just for the kids who are reading the books who look like the characters in the book, but also the other kids who don't, and realize that, oh, not all kids look like me, and so not all books need to look like me, and that's okay, and I understand, and now and if we can build that empathy and that just love and kindness into the kids early, that's how we change what the world is now to what it should be. And so I am not what's the word? I'm not blowing smoke. I'm not doing anything when I say you are doing important work, and your message is really important, and I really appreciate it. So keep that up.
Thank you.
And we will see you. I don't believe this is going to be the last time that you're in our network and we see your face. I think it's only the beginning. So I appreciate being on here. I know you're going to go back to bed, but everyone else, I hope you're kicking off your day, having an awesome Tuesday. If you're listening on the podcast, have an awesome, whether it's Tuesday evening, Wednesday, whenever you're listening to it. We appreciate you. If you need anything, let us know. And we will be back tomorrow morning. Ray will be back joining you tomorrow morning at the same time for Daily Dropping. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you.